Now, pro-Palestine protest chaos continued across London last night. This one forced in the, I beg your pardon, in the Labour constituency of Bethnal Green, there was a particular conundrum. Let's take a look at how GB News presenter Patrick Christys was welcomed when he arrived, asking why those there were protesting.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Why?
Shame on you!
Tell me why. You know why you're here?
What do you think?
Why do you feel so strongly?
What do you think? What do you think? Work it out.
You need to stop harassing the community. I believe you need to go.
It's a free
Please,
press.
I know it's a free place, but what it is, you're harassing our community.
Well, there we have it. Crowd gathered around the Labour Party office there in Bethnal Green and Bow because the local MP had not voted in favour of a ceasefire on Wednesday evening. Well, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio now by political commentator Mathew Stadlen and the former editor of the Daily Express, Dawn Neesom. Now, Dawn, let's start with you. Is it appropriate to have sort of gangs around an MP's local office?
No, it isn't. And look, I mean, it's Rishanara Ali and Absama Begum are the two local MPs in Tower Hamlets. They're both very young, very strong, very independently minded Muslim women who, I can't tell you, Tom, how hard they have worked to achieve what they have achieved, coming from their backgrounds, both working class backgrounds as well. So the reason they're doing it outside Rishanara's office is because she withheld her vote on the ceasefire, understandably so, obviously. So is it appropriate? No, it's not. Look, I don't go as far as calling these people hate marches. They're not. I think it's a small minority, and this was an offshoot. It's not one of the big marches. But what is more worrying is, I thought Patrick asked a very sensible question there, and it's a question that should be asked. It's like, why are you here? What do you want? Because what frightens me more isn't the fact that they were ganging up outside our Rishanara's office. It's the fact that a lot of them don't actually know. There was a clip recently with two young girls who were on a protest march, peacefully, nothing wrong with that. But when they were asked about what Hamas did on October the 7th, they didn't know. They said, I'm not qualified to comment on that. And it's like, well, why are you qualified to go on a march protesting for something you don't know what you're actually protesting for? So that's what worries me more. I mean, I think it's appalling that two young female MPs in that area who have worked incredibly hard are being targeted in this way, because it's both of them are being targeted. I just think it's the fact that it's almost become, it's not quite a fashion, but I think for certain areas, young, more left-wing student-type women in particular, it's almost like it's fashionable to go on a peace march.
It's interesting that you mentioned women there, because there has been perhaps a disproportionate number of women on these marches. I don't know if you've noticed that, Matthew.
I hadn't noticed that, no. What I did notice in that video was some very angry people, I felt, being intimidating towards a journalist. And there's just no place for that on the streets of this country. I very strongly disagree sometimes with what Patrick says on his show and on social media as well. But he was doing his job as a journalist, and he had every right to be there. And for the crowd, it seemed to be alternating between saying shame on you towards the Labour MP or towards the Labour Party more generally, and then also to a journalist going about his work was, well, I thought it was shameful behaviour, actually. There is absolutely no room in this country for intimidating our politicians, our democratically elected politicians, or indeed anyone else. Of course, people have the right to protest. They have the right to protest peacefully and within the law. What we saw there seemed to me to be stretching legal limits to their breaking point.
Now, I understand that last night at this particular protest, there were no arrests. There were police there present. Is it your view that the police have been too lenient then?
Well, I think we've seen certain examples on social media that might appear to show the police not being as firm as they might be entitled to. It's very difficult to criticise the police with a broad brush. It's a very difficult job that they're trying to do. They want to try to maintain order, public safety, and try to make sure that things don't escalate. But all I can say, and I'm not a police officer, is where a crime is committed, the police need to step in. On a wider issue, I'm really increasingly concerned by the spike that we're seeing in anti-Semitism. I'm someone who has spoken out about these marches, saying that they should be allowed to go ahead, and I do maintain that. However, there is a real problem with this chant that we keep hearing, or that we keep hearing discussed, at least, from the river to the sea. Because although it's undoubtedly true that some people who shout it don't mean it anti-Semitically and don't mean it to suggest that Israel should be eradicated from the map, we hear from Jewish people, not all Jewish people necessarily, but from some Jewish people, that they see it and hear it as anti-Semitic. And we know it's part of what Hamas wants to do. It wants to drive out the Jews from the river to the sea.
It's literally their mission statement.
Right,
They were elected.
exactly.
They were elected on that. And even worse, it wasn't just annihilation of the State of Israel. It was annihilation of Jewish people.
Just to finish the point, I read a piece that a friend sent me this morning. It was a shocking piece, but perhaps not surprising to wake up to. It was in The Guardian, and it was an anonymously written piece, and it was written by someone anonymously for his or her own safety. They're an Oxford University student, and they are experiencing anti-Semitism. And the question was, why are our academic institutions so affected by anti-Semitism? This is a real concern. I'm Jewish. I haven't had a single friend, and this doesn't mean that they're not well-meaning, I haven't had a single friend call me up in the week since October the 7th to say, are you okay? Not because I identify with Israel. That's also an anti-Semitic trope, to assume that all Jews identify with Israel. But just to see whether I'm okay in the context of anti-Semitism rising. And I'm someone who relentlessly calls out Islamophobia. Islamophobia is every bit as evil as anti-Semitism. I just worry, and this goes to the David Baddiel book and TV series, and I interviewed him about it for my podcast recently, that Jews don't count. And what does that mean? It just means if we complain of anti-Semitism, I don't think we're taken as seriously by some, not by everyone. The government has been strong on this, and so has Keir Starmer, but I don't think we are taken as seriously as other minorities.
You know what? It's really interesting. I had lunch with a very lovely lady, proper old East Ender, and she was telling me a story about her granddaughter. It's 4 years old. She goes to a school that welcomes all faiths, OK? It's not a very strict school religiously, but it welcomes all faiths. But it happens to have a uniform that lets you know that it is a Jewish school, OK? But it welcomes children of all faiths. This little girl's 4 years old. On the way into school the other day, on the tube, with her mum and dad, she was told, a 4-year-old, wearing her uniform, going to school, just started going to school, remember, at 4, she was told that she was unclean. And that she was basically... but the implication was, you are a filthy Jew. Now, I'm sorry if that's offending, but that was the implication that was aimed at a 4-year-old child on her way to school. And I put that on Twitter because I was so shocked by the story. And look, this is not taking it away from Islamophobia in any way, shape or form. All hate is horrific. I put this on Twitter, and you know what? What really annoyed me was people going, you're making it up. And it's like, hold on a minute, why would I make that up? And B, are you so set in your ways that you can't see what is happening? And look, nobody is taking it away, that the rise in hate on both sides is horrific.
When I call out Islamophobia, I may be wrong about this, but when I call out Islamophobia, as I have done a lot, I did it repeatedly on my LBC radio show, I do it on social media. When I call it out, I don't tend to have people saying, well, what about anti-Semitism? Don't you care about anti-Semitism?
Right.
I'm sure it's happened sometimes. But when I call out anti-Semitism, it's, well, what about other forms of racism? I'm equally committed to stamping out all forms of racism. It is just that we are seeing at the moment a very pronounced spike in anti-Semitism. And by the way, when the far right went marching to the cenotaph and abused the memory of our forefathers and foremothers, people who put their lives on the line and many of whom died for our freedoms and for this country. We saw those distasteful scenes at the cenotaph saying, we want our country back, England till I die. I call that out as well. And there's no doubt that that is directed at British Muslims, and it's very threatening.
But the people that did that, they were tackled straight away by the police, OK? And yet the other night we saw, again, a splinter group of Peace in Palestine protesters literally clambering all over the war memorial, covered in poppy wreaths still at Hyde Park, and the police did nothing.
Climbing over the one memorial in London that shows a dead soldier, one lying down.
Again, I'm not a spokesperson for the police, obviously, and clearly the police seem to have got some stuff wrong over recent weeks in a very difficult, febrile atmosphere. From my understanding from what they've said, it is not a specific criminal offence what went on there. If that is the case, then it should be made a criminal offence.
But there are examples, and Don, I'm sure you've seen these examples as well online, where the police, sure, it's not a specific offence to climb on a statue or a monument, but there have been cases, 2016, when Greenpeace clambered over lots of monuments.
8 arrests there.
The police arrested people on suspicion of criminal damage.
Yes.
Equally, when people have climbed on bridges, there have been arrests on suspicion of disturbing the peace. There have been ways that the police can arrest people for offences, even if what they're doing is not a specific offence in and of itself.